tonight's seminar, Kite Fishing 101, okay, is perhaps, you know, one of the most exciting seminars that we've done, and certainly one of my favorite tactics to talk about, to fish, and to teach people about. Who here has kite fished before? Okay? Quite a few of you. And if you haven't, let me tell you this. Kite fishing can be one of the most rewarding experiences out on the water. However, it could also be one of the most frustrating, right? Okay, and those of you that have kite fished certainly know that. And if you don't know that it can be frustrating, it's because you haven't done it enough. Kite fishing is all about the details. I cannot stress that enough. It's all about the details. And there are a lot of different details that go into it. And we're going to touch a little bit on all of those. You know, we can't sum up a lifetime of fishing in 90 minutes, but we're going to do our best to try and cover as much as we possibly can. First of all, let's talk about when to kite fish, okay? Any day of the year, 365 days a year, we can go out here and kite fish. That's the advantage. It's an effective tactic for a variety of species, including blackfin tuna, king mackerel, wahoo, cobia, of course, sailfish, right? Everybody's into sail fishing and kite fishing for sailfish, dolphin, okay? And you'll also catch some other oddball species as well, but those are the primary targets when we're kite fishing. You can kite fish year-round, as I mentioned, based on the conditions, and it's just going to be the species are going to change. In other words, in the springtime, you're going to see a lot more of the larger blackfin tuna that jump all over the kite baits. In the wintertime right now, obviously the predominant species that people are targeting on the kites is sailfish. There are a lot of different ways to kite fish. There's the tournament way, and when I call it the tournament way, we all know that there's these high-end sailfish tournaments, these circuits that take place down here throughout the winter. These guys go out there, they're flying 2 kites, 3 baits off of each kite. There's a guy at the wheel the entire time holding the boat into the current, and it's an entire team that's working together like a well-oiled machine. And there's a lot of money at stake, hundreds of thousands of dollars based on releases, on how many sailfish they can hook and release. And sometimes on a really, really good day, it's not uncommon for boats. You know, I think the record in South Florida, does anybody know the record on how many sailfish were caught in a single day off kites in South Florida? It's like 50. It's maybe even more than that. Okay, so it can be incredibly effective. It's a lot, okay, it really is. So keep in mind, though, we're not going to be talking about that tournament way of sail fishing, or of kite fishing, because that's not Kite Fishing 101. That's not what you're going to be doing, okay? We're going to be talking about a different way. The basics, drifting primarily, where you don't have to be at the wheel the entire time, where you can fish 1 kite with 1 bait, and ultimately work your way up to 2 kites with 3 baits off of each kite. Okay, and we're going to touch on that. Don't be afraid to do that. Okay, if you can go out there and fly a kite, why fish 1 bait off the kite when you can fish 3 baits off the same kite? And obviously increase your odds of catching not only 1 fish, but multiple fish. Okay? Some of the benefits of kite fishing. Number 1, we can fish on the downwind side of the boat. So when the boat is drifting, obviously, as an example, if the wind is in my face, the boat is drifting this way behind me, I can feed baits out and they're going to drift out away from the boat, but I can't fish the downwind side, the other side of the boat. Well, with kites, now I can, because of course that wind is blowing the kite in that direction, and I'm fishing on the downwind side of the boat. So we're able to have a 360-degree presentation. And it's important that you understand that when we are kite fishing, when we're drifting, we're fishing around the entire boat. We're fishing 2 kites, 3 baits coming off of each kite, but on that downwind side, or I should say on the upwind side, we're also fishing deep baits and flat lines up on the surface. So we have baits all around the boat. Generally 12 lines, so we're fishing 12 goggle eyes. So think about you on any given day, or any typical boater that's going out there and fishing the edge in 100 to 200 feet of water, and you may fish 2 or 3 baits, 4 baits. I've got 12 goggle eyes swimming around my boat. Who's going to be more successful? It's not a trick question. Who's going to be more successful? Mike is going to be more successful, okay? And you can get there as well. You really can, but of course it has to start somewhere. So having that 360-degree presentation is certainly a benefit. Number two, another huge benefit to kite fishing is it incredibly stealthy. Your bait is being presented, your live bait, and understand kite fishing is all about live bait. You're not going to fish a dead bait off of a kite. Your live bait may die, okay, but you're starting with a live bait. It's incredibly stealthy because there's very little terminal tackle in the water. The bait is being dangled from the kite, and he's in the water, and he's on or very near the surface, usually within a few feet of the surface. So there's not a lot of line in the water. Oftentimes the leader is barely in the water, and it's certainly barely visible to the fish, especially when that goggle eye is up right up on top, flickering on the surface. There's nothing in the water. The hook in the bait is on the top of the bait fish, so it's hard for game fish to even see that hook. So it's an incredibly stealthy approach to fishing and a very natural approach. And when you're targeting, especially in the springtime, very keen-eyed predators like blackfin tuna that have a large eye and they could see everything. The less terminal tackle that you have in the water, of course, the more effective you're going to be and the more bites that you're going to get, which is why kite fishing is such an effective tactic for those big 20 to 30 pound blackfins that we see in the spring. In addition to that, it's incredibly exciting, okay? It's visual. Kite fishing is all about the bite, as far as I'm concerned. I don't even care about reeling in the fish. I just want to see the bite. Okay, you're looking at your kites, you're looking at your lines, you're monitoring your baits, okay, and you're just waiting. And at any second, the water can just explode. You know, I could tell you a couple of real exciting moments I've had. I remember one day setting up on a drift, putting the kites up, 5 minutes into the drift, a 50 to 60 pound wahoo just skies on the bait. And when I say sky, that fish just torpedoes out of the water into the air. And you're watching all of this unfold right in front of you. If that doesn't get you excited, you should probably go play golf or something, right? So fortunately, hooked that fish and landed it. And it was in the 50-pound class, beautiful wahoo. Got set up on the next drift, the very next drift. 5 minutes into the drift, the exact same thing happens. Another 50-plus pound wahoo. I missed that one, okay, and wasn't able to catch that fish. But that excitement of just seeing that, you know, other times a sailfish will come up to your bait, will put its big dorsal sail up, and will just swim around the bait. So you see this beautiful sail, you know, swimming around the goggle eye as he's inspecting it, waiting to just clobber it, okay? If that doesn't excite you, I don't know what else would, you know what I mean? It's moments like that. The blackfin tunas, the kingfish that just crush these baits. Super, super exciting. So it's that whole visual aspect. Sometimes you know what species it is that ate your bait because either you saw it, may it be a sailfish, or you guessed what it was. But when that line pops out of the clip and you're reeling up all that slack, that moment when you come tight on that fish and line just starts screaming off your reel, that's one of the most exciting moments in all of fishing, as far as I'm concerned. So, really exciting tactic. It is most effective when we are fishing the edge. And here, as I mentioned, when I'm referring to the edge, I'm talking about that 100 to 200 foot range. So when you are kite fishing, the very first thing that you have to do when you go out here is determine where am I going to fish, right? Now, most of us we're fishing at a Boca Inlet, Hillsborough Inlet, Port Everglades. Is that where everybody's from for the most part, right? Locally here. So we're going to go out, and what do we look for? We want to look for nice, clean water, obviously, because we know the dolphins, the blackfin tuna, wahoo, sailfish, they like that clean blue water. Okay. Sometimes that edge, that clean water may be in 100 feet, sometimes it's in 200 feet, sometimes it's not there at all. And the water is just that green, you know, gooey, nasty kind of water. And the only thing you're going to catch in that water is king mackerel. Okay, so you can kite fish right there, but you're likely going to catch kingfish and bonitas and nothing else. And, oh yeah, bonitas eat kite baits. Okay, just want to throw that out there. They love kite baits. So again, clean water is really important. Current, you want to be moving. because there are days, especially in the summertime, when there's not a drop of wind and there's no current, and you stop the boat, it's like a lake, literally just glass, and the boat is just sitting in one spot. Not only can you not even get the kite up in the air because there's no wind whatsoever, even with a balloon, sometimes you cannot get the kite to fly, okay, even with a helium balloon, but you're not moving, you're sitting in one spot. So of course, in order to be effective when you're kite fishing, you've got to cover ground. So you want a little bit of a breeze, you want some current. Before you even deploy any baits, I'm telling you, it's super important. Get your boat out there, decide where you're gonna fish, stop the boat. Get everything ready. Do not deploy the kite, do not deploy any baits, don't do anything, just get everything ready and determine what direction and what speed you're drifting at, okay? If I'm drifting in and I want to fish that 100 to 200 foot depth range, but I'm being pushed inshore, where do I want to stop my boat? 200. Okay, exactly. I don't want to stop it at 200, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, because by the time you get the kite up and your bait set, you're going to be in 100. Okay, before, and if you're lucky. So don't be afraid to push out even a little bit further, maybe 250. Give yourself enough time to make sure that your baits are set, your spread is set, everything looks good when you get into that strike zone. So determine, like I said, what direction and what speed you're drifting in, okay, and then set up in that particular area. If you're being pushed offshore, start in 75 foot, 90 foot, you know, and then drift across it. If you're drifting straight north, or just being pushed in just a little or pushed off a little bit, you may want to start in 130, you know, and just drift straight up the line. 90% of the time, you're going to be drifting north. It's rare that you will drift south, okay? 90% of the time, you're going to be drifting north. So keep that in mind as well. And again, you'll be pushed in, you'll be pushed off. So determine that before you set up. Make a mental note of every single bite that you get. What depth was I in? Every single time we get a strike, I look right at that sounder. I look right at the Ferrino machine, and I make a mental note. We're in 150, we're in 180, we're in 120, we're in 140, whatever it is. I'm constantly looking at that. And oftentimes, a pattern will develop. And you'll know that, hey, from 130 to 150 is where we're getting all of our bites. So maybe I don't need to set up in 250, okay, because I'm only getting bites in that 130 to 150. So maybe I'll set up in 180. You're kind of picking up what I'm throwing down here to maximize the amount of time that I'm fishing in that strike zone. Because keep in mind, if you're flying one kite with one bait, it's not a big deal to reel in that kite, to move and reset. Fly two kites with 3 baits off of each kite, and retrieving all of that, reeling it all in, and then setting that spread again, that takes some time. It doesn't happen in 2 minutes, okay? It really doesn't. It takes some time. So you want to maximize, like I said, the amount of time that you're fishing in that strike zone. So the boat, you can kite fish, of course, off of any boat. Obviously, a center console is going to provide you with the easiest platform to work off of if you're going to be drifting. And in my particular case, my 39 CV drifts parallel sideways always, no matter the conditions, which is an advantage to CV boats. So we don't need to use a sea anchor as an example. I'm not worried about my line coming off the stern or off the bow. The boat's going to drift sideways, so it's easy for us to set our kites. And again, we're fishing 2 kites, and I'm going to talk to you a lot about that tonight, about fishing 2 kites, because I kind of consider, I don't want to say it's advanced tactics, it isn't. It's kite fishing 101. If you can fly 1, you can fly 2. The only difference is you need more people, and you need another kite rod, and you need more rods. So now, right, so, you know, all you need is more money and more friends, and you can fish 2 kite rods, okay? That's really it, but you could do it, okay? So anyhow, center consoles are fine, you know, walk-arounds, any other type of boat. We're going to start with the actual kite rod itself, okay? Now, in our particular case, this is, as you can see, I'm going to try and do this without popping my balloon, just a short little rod. We're not using this rod to reel in fish. We're not using this rod for any other purpose other than to fly our kite. So it's very short. It doesn't need to be any longer than this. And it's coupled with a Daiwa 750 electric reel. You can absolutely kite fish with a manual reel. For years, decades, guys were kite fishing with a Penn Senator. Okay, there was a manual reel. When these small compact, you're flagged, when these small compact electric reels came out, it changed the game. It is absolutely vital. I am telling you this, that if you are just getting into kite fishing, the little electric kite reel changes everything. And it is worth every single penny that you spend, because it's like having another person on the boat. Plus it has a variable speed. So I can push a button and just push this lever forward, and it's going to retrieve my kite. And it will stop at a preset position. So once I deploy this, I can push this lever up, it'll bring in my kite, and it'll stop the kite 20 feet away from the boat. Now that's important, because as I'm retrieving the kite, I can now move over to my rods and reel in the line, rather than having to do this manually. So the small electric kite reel is absolutely vital. I cannot stress that enough. Obviously, they come with little plugs, little power cords that you can plug into an outlet on the boat, depending on how your boat is rigged, or little alligator clips, and you can connect it to an external battery if you wanted to. I'm sure that they have these here for sale somewhere as well, and that's probably part of that package that Marshall was mentioning. I guarantee that this reel comes in that package. So again, really, really important. You can do it manually, but like I said, game changer. As far as the line on the reel, 50-pound braid is a good place to start. However, the guys that are in the advanced arena of kite fishing will have multiple kite rods rigged with multiple classes of line. In other words, they'll have kite rods, sorry about that, with 30-pound line, 50-pound line, and 80-pound line. Why the difference? When there's no wind whatsoever, they'll scale down to 30-pound. When it's an average day, 50-pound braid is perfect. If it's a very windy day, 80-pound braid. Otherwise, that 50-pound will part, it'll break, okay? So if you can only choose one, and if you only had one, 50-pound braid, like I said, is the way to go. You don't have to fill the entire reel with 18,000 yards of 50-pound braid. Okay, you can fill it with monofilament and just have a few hundred yards of braid. Because remember, when we're deploying that balloon, when we're deploying that kite, I should say, it's only going out 200 feet, okay? 300 feet at the very, very most. So I don't need 1,800 yards of braid on my reel. Save that money and spend it on something else. There's no leader. The end of the braid is tied to a very small snap swivel. Right there, just a very small snap swivel. And of course, you can come up at the end of the seminar and take a much closer look at all of this. On the leader itself, we have 3 release clips that are spaced at 50-foot intervals with little swivels on the line. And I'm going to explain real quickly how this works. Each of these release clips has a hole drilled through it. With each clip, the hole gets larger and larger. So this top clip has a very small hole. The second clip has a slightly larger hole right on the side. And finally, my closest clip has a large hole. Now on the line itself at 50-foot intervals are tiny little swivels that are tied into the line. Well, this large hole will go over that swivel. Everybody kind of follow me? Whereas this tiny hole will not. So when that first swivel comes out, it catches, it goes through these 2 clips, it goes through these, and then it catches this clip and pulls it up. And then when the next swivel comes out, because the swivels are different sizes also, when the swivel comes out, it'll go through this hole and it'll catch the middle clip. Now, while all of this may sound complicated, it really isn't. It's very easy, and if it sounds complicated, you can purchase a kit that's fully rigged with all 3 clips with the different size swivels and everything already rigged up, where all you have to do is buy the reel and just spool this onto the reel. But ultimately, you better learn how to do it, because guess what? This is gonna break, okay? I'm telling you, it's gonna break. There's gonna be a day and a time when this breaks, and you're gonna be out there, and if you don't have another complete setup, or if you just need to put on another clip, whatever it is, you better understand how the system works. But as I mentioned, it's not complicated, you just have to do it right, because if you mess up one swivel, guess what? The entire system isn't gonna work. Okay, if you mess up the clips, if you put that's why they're color coordinated, black, gray, white. Okay, if you take the black clip and put it where the white clip is, the entire system is not gonna work. So it's about the details. But like I said, it is not complicated, you just have to do it right. Now, understand that these clips are adjustable. And this is very important, the little snap right there, that opens up, there's a little snap, okay? You can push that in, now it snaps closed, and then when it snaps open to release your line. But there's a little knob that allows you to adjust the tension on this clip. This is very, very important. Why? Let's assume, for example, I'm gonna kind of share a couple different scenarios. Very, very calm day, very little wind. I've got to use a helium balloon to help get my kite in the air. It's one of those summer days in June, July. There's literally not a breath of wind. You get out there in the morning. You're struggling to get your kite up in the air. Fortunately, you finally get it up there. You can't even fish a goggle eye off the kite because the goggle eye is too heavy and it's bringing your kite down. So you're able to only fish pilchards, very small baits, okay, very light baits, which is why it's always a good idea to have a mixture of live bait as well. Now, if that clip is really, really tight, if the tension on that release clip is tight, a fish is gonna come up, he's gonna grab the bait, and he's gonna swim away, and guess what's gonna happen to your kite? It's gonna go like this. All the way down into the water, okay? Because the clip is too tight and he's not gonna pop the line out of the clip. Does that make sense? Okay? On the other hand, it's a really windy day and your clip is too loose and you're fishing a goggle eye and you let your kite fly way out there and you put your goggle eye, dangling from the kite and the gog decides to swim straight down and he goes pop and he pops open the release clip. And all of the line comes down, and you now have to reset everything. So it's all about the correct adjustment on that release clip. Make sure that you check it, and not just once, check it periodically through the day, because they tend to have a mind of their own, okay? And sometimes they get a little bit tighter and a little bit looser. If a little salt or grit gets in there, so just constantly check it. Also maintain those clips. A little lubricant every now and then to make sure that that tension knob works. And I'm telling you, these two, let me just say it a different way. Every single component in kite fishing will at one time or another fail, okay? Every single clip, every single swivel, every single kite, every single balloon, everything will fail at one time or another if you kite fish a lot. And you will learn that you better have a backup to everything. And then you better have a backup to the backup, okay, for everything, because it's gonna happen if you do it enough. So it's super important that you double check everything right from the start and that you maintain everything. Don't use, these kites, I'm not sure what they sell them here for, but I know that an SFE kite, Marshall, off the top of your head, what do you guys sell? 125, 140. Okay, 125, 140 bucks for a kite. Are you going to use a little Kmart Blue Light special swivel to hold that kite to the end of your line? Because that swivel is going to fail and that kite's going to go flying. And again, it'll happen. So make sure that you use quality equipment across the board. This is not cheap stuff. Make sure that you use quality equipment. So like I said, maintain those clips, maintain the kite rod, maintain the connection, that wire cable connection. Make sure that you shoot a little lubricant in there, because that connection too will fail out on the water. And you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're kite fishing and your equipment fails. And I know I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but I can't stress how important this is, because consistent kite fishing, to really be successful, all of your equipment has to work well, okay? Because anything that could happen is going to happen. These lines will break. Make sure you check your line. Don't be afraid periodically to re-rig the entire kite outfit. In other words, all of this line in between the clips, depending on how often you kite fish, it's not uncommon multiple times throughout the season, and certainly in advance of any tournament or any time we're going out to film a show, we re-rig everything from start to finish. The kite itself. There are some really important features to fishing kites that you need to know about. And keep in mind, while there's a variety of different brands, the most common fishing kite is an SFE, these red and green kites. The green and the red is exactly the same. There is no difference between the red and the green other than the fact that one's red and one's green. Okay, that's the only difference. The reason that they're different colors is, as an example, on my 39 CV, we fish 2 kites. So we always know that Carlos, my co-host on the show, his kites are red. He's up in the bow. My kites are green. I'm in the stern. Everybody likes to rig their kites a little bit different, okay? Then fine-tune them a little bit differently. So he knows those are his. I know the green ones are mine. Okay, that's really the only difference. And sometimes, depending on the bridle system, which we're going to talk about, the bridle is what's holding that balloon on the kite. The bridle may be designed for a bow fished kite or for a stern fished kite, because some of those bridles, and like I said, we're going to talk more about it in a second, but have 3 legs and some have 4 legs, and it all depends on how you rig it on the kite. Nevertheless, when you purchase a kite, the SFEs are the most popular. If you only can buy one, buy this one. Okay, don't buy any other brand. There are good brands out there, but if you can only have one kite, this is proven to be the most versatile and best kite that money can buy, for sure, is the SFE. You can use this kite in wind conditions from as little as 0 wind using a balloon to help it fly to as much as 30 knot winds. Okay, so really 0 to 30 knots. It's a very versatile kite. When you put them together, there are these spars, these black fiber poles in the back that all fit into this little fitting right in the center here. You will notice on these spars these little white hashes. Everybody see those little white marks on these spars right there? You guys see it back there? Make sure, see how now you can't see the bottom one? That is rigged incorrectly. So that has to be turned so the white is all facing out. And while there's no difference to the eye, there's no difference to you on if that little white hash mark is facing out or facing in, I'm telling you it will make a difference as to how this kite flies. So it's very important that those little hash marks all point out. Also understand that you'll see a little number right here, 5E, okay? These spars are not interchangeable. So if I took these spars off of a different SFE kite, they would fit on this kite, yes. Would the kite fly and perform the same way? No. Okay, so you have to order spars for a 5E kite. And the only way to do that is to call SFE, okay? They will work if you attach a balloon to the kite. But without that, you'll have a difficult time getting that kite to perform at its peak performance. This is not, understand, this is not a kid's toy, okay? This is a scientifically engineered, technical machine. And I know it doesn't seem that, and and I'm not exaggerating. This is a really incredible item that does magical things on the water. And every little component about it is super, super important. It's not a joke, it's not a toy. Okay, it's really an important piece of fishing equipment, and it has to be treated that way, and you need to understand that. On the back side, or the front side, depending on how you look at it, you'll see that there's a little kind of piece of plastic. Okay, what this does is adjust the flight angle of this kite. Remember that this kite is going to catch air, just like this. The air is blowing. Let's say we've got a fan right here. The wind is blowing this way. This kite is going to catch that air. There are times where this kite, you'll notice how I'm turning it, okay, will catch more wind. If I turn it this way, it'll catch less wind. Okay, so if I keep it like this, there's times it'll fly straight up. So my kite is way up there. It's straight up in the air. Do I want my kite straight up in the air? No, I want my kite out there. But I don't want that angle to be too low to the water because I don't want my kite right there. I want my kite up there. So using this little bridle system, this little plastic configuration, you're able to adjust the flight angle of the kite. However, understand that you have to move this in very short, small intervals. You're not moving this little fitting here by 2 inches at a time. When I say short intervals, literally moving it 1/4 of an inch will change the flight angle of the kite, okay, 1/4 of an inch. So if your kite is flying too high, straight up above you, you would adjust that, like I said, to get the kite to fly further away from you. Right in the front of this system is a little swivel, right in the tip of my fingers right here. It's just a little barrel swivel. You'll notice that this line sometimes tangles and wraps around that barrel swivel the wrong way. Make sure that you inspect that before you deploy your kite, because if this line is wrapped around this swivel the wrong way, your kite will not fly properly. And I am telling you that there is nothing worse than trying to get a kite to fly that just doesn't want to fly. Okay, and it happens. These things have literally a mind of their own. Okay, we've got some great footage of me trying to get a kite to fly for probably 2 hours straight. Okay, and I just can't get that thing to fly. But I won't give up. I'll just keep trying. And eventually, it's a combination of this adjustment, where the balloon is, you know, so many different things have to come together. But like I said, make sure that that's not crossed. Okay, make sure that it's rigged properly. You'll also notice on the back of the kite, these little floats. Anybody know why we put those there? Okay, because this $150 kite sinks like a rock, okay? And you don't want it to sink like a rock, and it does. So these little floats, they weigh nothing, and if this falls in the water, which it will, okay, you will lose kites in the water. It's going to happen. This will give you a chance to retrieve the kite. You don't get them all back, but you know, with the extra floats, you tend to get most of them back, okay? Also understand that once the kite is flying and you have really good trajectory and it's stable and that kite, you're looking up at it and everything is just perfect, okay? And you're just like, it's just awesome. And then suddenly, for no reason whatsoever, the kite just starts to do this. Okay, and just starts to go spinning like crazy, out of control, for no reason whatsoever. And it starts diving down into the water. And you're freaking out because you've got 3 lines going up with 3 baits hanging off that kite, and there's nothing you can do. You're trying to slowly retrieve it. You're letting out line. You're adjusting, you know, with the reel. You're adjusting pressure to try and get it to stabilize. Sometimes you can save it. Sometimes you can't. I call it the cartwheel of death, because once it starts turning like that and spinning out of control, there's only one way it's going, only one way it's ending. That kite's going in the water. Okay, and once it's wet, understand this too. This will not fly wet. When a kite gets wet, it won't fly. So don't try and fly a wet kite, because it's not going to work. It's got to dry. This is also why in this kite bag, we have 20 kites, okay? And 20 kites, and you'll see that, because as soon as it gets wet, you're out of business, okay? Now keep in mind, as well, there are different kites for different scenarios. Remember what I said to you, that that kite is ideal for 0 to 30 knots. But if you go out there and it's really windy, okay, and you're like, you know what, you want to go kite fishing this weekend. It's supposed to blow 25 northeast, 10-foot seas. Go, go. I'm telling you, the bite's going to be hot. It's going to be awesome. Okay, but I'd also recommend you fly this kite. This is the high wind kite, okay? Now understand, what is the difference? It's smaller, so it catches less wind, because you don't need that much square footage when it's blowing 25 knots, 30 knots. This is enough, okay? So it's a smaller kite. It also has holes in it to diffuse some of that air, okay? So it's designed specifically for high wind situations. Do you put a balloon on this? No. Why not? Because it's blowing 25, right? And you don't need a balloon. So this is not designed for balloons in any way whatsoever. It's designed only for when it's very, very windy. Okay, it's called a high wind kite. Now on the flip side, this is called a low wind kite. Okay, as you can see, it's larger than your standard red SFE kite. So it catches more wind than a standard kite. It's also a slightly lighter material. So the actual sail, we'll call it, the material itself is lighter than a standard kite. So it's always a good idea to have a variety of kites. But as I mentioned earlier, if you can only have one, that red or green SFE is the right kite to choose. Now, on days when you don't have a lot of wind, as you can see, we attach a helium balloon to the kite. And what I will tell you that if you are just getting started, the helium balloon makes a huge, huge difference when you are kite fishing. Okay? When I say huge, night and day. I fish a helium balloon as often as I possibly can, even when there's enough wind. When that wind is borderline or there's enough wind to get the kite up without a balloon, I'll still fish a balloon because it just makes everything so much easier. So much easier when you have the balloon on the kite. However, in order to do that effectively, requires some specialized equipment. For starters, the balloons. Okay, that's the first thing that you need are these large helium balloons that you must carry on your boat. And keep in mind, you must have a way of inflating this balloon. This is helium. It's not hot air, it's helium. Okay, well, how do you carry helium on your boat? One way is the way that we do it with a helium tank. Okay, it's just a cylinder like a diving tank. Okay, this is a small one or a medium-sized one. These come in different sizes. Up on the top is a gauge, okay, with a meter. There's obviously a hose. That's helium. What'd you say? There's $8? Yeah, that's $8, right? Wait, there's another $8 and another $8, okay? So, but anyhow, that's one way. Now, keep in mind, that's a fixed system. We take that helium tank, we go to a welding shop. That's where you get the helium, from a welding shop. They fill that tank up. It costs approximately $90 to fill that with helium, and it will fill approximately 5 balloons. So every single time you inflate a balloon, between the cost of the balloon and the cost of the helium is $25. So do you want that balloon to break? No. Remember what I told you. Kite fishing is not cheap. I'm telling you that right now. Kite fishing is not cheap, but it's incredibly effective, so it's worth every penny. So that's one way. Another way is you go to Party City, and they sell the portable, disposable helium tanks that you take home and you fill balloons with. All right, there are these little pink helium tanks. There's 2 different sizes that they sell. They cost $40 to $60, and they'll fill about 3 balloons. Okay, so that's a good backup or an alternative to a fixed system on the boat. The only disadvantage to that is, well, every single time you've got to go to Party City and buy this disposable tank. Whereas here, you're able to keep helium and more helium for a longer period of time. But it is absolutely essential, okay, like I said, and will really change the game. So helium, obviously you need the balloons that you need, and then you need a way of affixing that balloon to the back of the kite. And you'll notice that the size of the balloon, you don't want to inflate the balloon any larger than the kite itself. Okay? However, ideally, you want it to be approximately the same width as the kite. Okay? Ideally, you want the balloon to be at the same width or just under it. Now you'll notice that there are these little, hopefully everybody can see them, there's this bridle system that's holding the balloon on. Everybody kind of see that right there? Okay, there are 4 legs. Each corner of the kite has a leg, and these are adjustable with these little plastic knobs, or little sliders, I should call them. You inflate the balloon first before you attach it to the kite, obviously. And right in the center of the kite, and I'm going to now just refer to the red one just so you can see it. right here in the center is a little hole, right there. In that little cross, there's a little hole right there. Everybody see that? That is designed for a little piece of rigging floss, which is where the balloon is tied to. Now keep in mind, do not use monofilament to tie the balloon to the kite. Or, guess what's going to happen? Your balloon is going to pop because the end of the monofilament is sharp. So we use a very soft wax rigging floss. Okay, wax rigging floss. That's what you tie the nipple of the balloon, or I should say the knot part, right to that little hole. And then you tighten this bridle, all of the legs, so that it is firmly keeping the balloon on the kite, and then using electrical tape. Listen to what I'm saying, electrical tape. Not duct tape, not scotch tape, not masking tape, electrical tape, because any other tape will not work. Use electrical tape and just put a very small piece very carefully on top of each of those bridles, right? Everybody see that right there? The idea is for this to be one cohesive unit, okay? One cohesive unit. Remember, in my hand right here, this is barely moving at all. 300 feet away from the boat, where it's blowing 15 to 18 knots or more up in the air, this is shaking violently. How do we know? Because we put a GoPro on one, and it was like this, shaking violently, okay, at an incredible speed, just, vibrating like crazy. So if anything is loose, it's all going to come apart. It's all going to loosen up. Your balloon may potentially come off the kite. It may pop. You want this to be one cohesive unit, and you want to treat it like a baby. One of the funniest things is when you're going for another drift and you're moving up for another drift and you've got these balloons on these kites, who's the designated kite holder? Because, right, you can't leave this in a rod holder when you're moving at 40 miles an hour, can you? Obviously not. You can't, I don't have a cabin on my boat, on my center console, so somebody literally has to hold it very, very carefully, because if they pop it, and let me tell you, it's happened, okay? It's happened, obviously. So, make sure that it's one cohesive unit. Now, understand, the way that this balloon is rigged, right in the center of the kite, what direction will this kite fly in? It's going to go straight up, just like this, okay? It's going to go straight up. So if I'm only fishing one kite, having the balloon in the center of the kite is perfectly fine, because I'm only fishing one kite. However, if we're fishing two kites, one off the stern, one off the bow, if we rig both kites just like this with the balloon in the center, what's going to happen? I'm going to have two kites right here, and we're going to argue over airspace. Trust me, me and Carlos, my co-host, we fight over airspace all of the time. I'm like, get your kite out of my airspace, because to me, it's all my airspace. And I don't know. We just have this massive ongoing fight over where his kite is all of the time versus where my kite is all of the time, So it's important to be able to direct these kites in different directions and to steer them. And you could easily do that in a number of different ways. When you are putting a balloon on, if this balloon is more to this side of the kite, if I move the balloon to this side of the kite's going to fly in that direction. Okay, so it'll fly in the opposite direction of where the balloon is. Now, why is that? Let me just explain. I'm going to kind of turn around and do it this way. So here's our kite. The balloon's, let's try and do it this way. Okay, the balloon's right in the center. This kite's going to fly straight up. Okay, the wind is blowing right in our face here. This kite's going to fly straight up. If I move the balloon toward me, look what happens to the kite. See that? And now it flies to the left. It flies in that direction. If I move to the opposite side, the opposite happens because it elevates that side of the kite. It's very much like a plane wing, so to speak, but sideways, okay? So you position the balloon opposite of the side that you want the kite to fly in. Now keep in mind, if you would like, or I don't want to say if you'd like, but if you don't have a balloon, you also can steer the kite by affixing split shots to the side. So you see that little split shot right there, and there's another one right here on the bottom. Okay, so you don't need to steer the kite with a balloon. You can steer it with split shots. However, I don't need to use split shots and a balloon at the same time. In other words, I can steer that kite by where I position that balloon. Another reason, remember earlier when I said, well, we know the red kite and the green kite, the two different colors, because when we put the balloons on them, we know which side of this, is that going to be up in the bow? Is that going to be in the stern? So then when you're resetting up for another drift, you know exactly whose kite is whose. But understand, with the split shots, it's opposite of the balloon. The side that you put the split shots on is the direction the kite's going to go. Okay, whereas with the balloon, it's opposite. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Yep. Also remember that these split shots, very sensitive as well. In other words, you don't need to put 7 split shots on and 7 on the bottom. Start with 1 up on top and 1 on the bottom and see how the kite reacts. And then you might have to add a second one or increase the size of the split shot, obviously. Sometimes just 1 shot up in the corner is enough to get the kite to fly in the proper direction. The larger or more of a spread that you have, can you hold that for me if you don't mind? If you're fishing 2 kites, you want this kite to be over there, and you want this kite to be over there. You don't want them to be like this. You want them to be like that. Okay? Ideally, you want them like that. Okay? Because otherwise, goggle eyes, especially goggle eyes, pilchard's not so bad, but goggle eyes is a schooling bait fish. If these goggle eyes see these goggle eyes, guess what they try and do? They swim toward each other. And the last thing you want is to have a tangled mess of all your goggle eyes, right? So in turn, you want to keep a nice wide pattern, a nice spread. Your bow kite off to the right, your stern kite off to the left. And you're covering more of the water column, more of the area around the boat that way as well. If only fishing 1 kite, as I mentioned, a balloon right in the center, or no split shots at all, if there's enough wind, then you don't need any split shots at all. Your kite is going to fly right up in the middle. Practice. I'm telling you that getting a kite to fly requires practice. Anybody ever dunk a kite in the water? Whoever's not raising their hand has never gone kite fishing, okay? Because I'm telling you that all of you who have gone kite fishing at one point have dunked a kite in the water or couldn't get it to fly. Have you ever had that scenario where you went out and you just couldn't get your kite to fly? We watched the other day, it was hilarious. A guy standing on his hardtop of his boat for an hour trying to get a kite to fly with very little wind. It just wasn't going to happen. No balloon. You need some wind, right? You can't just throw this up in the air and expect it to fly. You need wind. It's a kite. It's got to catch air, okay? And if there's no wind at all, and if you don't have a balloon, you're going to struggle to get this up. You really are. So, like I said, you've got to have the right conditions. So once we've decided where we're going to fish and we've rigged our kite, and like I said, even if it's borderline, I'm going with a balloon. It's going to take me a little bit more time up front to get set up, but it's going to make my life so much easier. And I'll explain also why it's going to make it so much easier, because the first thing that I'm going to do once I'm ready to fish is I'm going to deploy my kite. And I'm going to get it not way up there. I'm going to just fly the kite to where it's 40 feet away from the boat. And then it's going to stop 40 feet away from the boat. Okay? Why? Because at this point, 40 feet away from the boat, I've reached my very first clip. My first clip is set 40 feet away from the kite. So if there's not a lot of wind, only 40 feet away from the boat, that kite may not fly until it's higher in the sky. So many different things can happen. But with having that balloon on there, it keeps it aloft, it keeps everything much more stable, and it just makes your life kite fishing so much easier. It really does. If you've spent all of this money, time, and effort to do it, go all of the way. It'll make that big of a difference. So at this stage, I'm ready to deploy my baits. And keep in mind, kite fishing, as I mentioned earlier, is all about live bait fishing. Okay, you've got to fish live baits. The #1 kite bait is goggle eyes, okay? I don't care if you catch them or buy them, and that was last month's seminar on catching live bait, okay? But you need goggle eyes. If you can't get your hand on goggle eyes, pilchards, threadfin herring, they're okay, but they're really fragile, these are fragile baits, whereas a goggle eye is very hardy. Blue runners are also okay. Sometimes blue runners are a little bit too strong, believe it or not, especially if there's not a lot of wind. Those things are just crazy. But goggle eyes, certainly the #1 bait. Because this is Kite Fishing 101, we're not going to talk a lot about bridling baits, which is using a circle hook and a rigging band or rigging floss to attach the hook to the bait without actually inserting the hook in the bait. You can easily go out there, take a J hook, you know, a VMC 7.0 live bait hook, and just right under the spine, right in the center of the back. That's all that you need to do. It's a good hook. It'll work on everything. Okay, kingfish, wahoo, blackfin tunas, cobia, sailfish, everything. Okay, if you're fishing the pilchards or a smaller bait, scale it back to a 5.0 hook. So at this stage, we're ready to deploy our baits. We get everything set up, the boat's positioned in the right place, and now I'm going to put my kite up. I'm going to pop my reel into free spool, my Daiwa electric kite reel. I'm going to let the kite fly out away from the boat to 40 foot to where the first black clip is. How do I know that point? Because remember, the swivels are coming off the reel like we talked about, and it's going to catch this clip, and the clip is now going to be right here in front of me. At this stage, I'm going to take my kite rod, which, by the way, typical kite rod, best kite rod in the world, as a matter of fact. It's a Chaos, okay, composite rod rated for 15 to 30 pound line, 7 foot, right here. All around rod, it's a combination of fiberglass and graphite, so you've got sensitivity, you've got strength, it's incredibly light, easy to fish all day, super strong. You can land nearly anything that is going to eat your kite baits, you'll be able to catch on this rod. It's coupled to a Daiwa Saltiga 50 reel, a lever drag reel. It's a single speed. You can fish 2-speed reels. Is it absolutely necessary when kite fishing? No, but certainly doesn't hurt. Okay, this just happens to be a single speed reel, and it's loaded with 500 yards of 20-pound diamond orange crush line. Now, what's really important here is, #1, the 20-pound test is perfectly fine. You can step it up to 30-pound if you want a little bit more insurance, but don't go any higher than 30-pound. But what's even more important than that is the color. You've got to be able to see your line. Okay, makes a huge difference when you can see your line going up to the release clips and then down into the water. Okay, makes a huge difference. So either the high vis line, something in that chartreuse color, or this orange line, also, you know, real easy to see out there. The rod itself, like I said, pretty standard. We use these rods across the board in a variety of different applications, but they're definitely our go-to kite rods. The way that it's rigged is really, really important. The very first thing that you're going to do is, through your main running line is going to be a small little black ceramic ring. Everybody see that? I don't know if you can see that little ring right there that's hanging from the line. Okay, right there. It's just a small little black ceramic ring. This is the ring that you are snapping into the release clip on the kite rod. Do not put your line on that clip. You're going to put the ring on that clip. Everybody follow me there? I am telling you, don't make this mistake. Everything that I'm telling you today is because I've made these mistakes. Okay, so I'm trying to help you shorten the learning curve. Don't put your line on there. One of a few things could happen. #1, it could chafe your line when it pops open. That's a metal pin with a sharp end. Okay, do you want that to happen? You know, so that could chafe your line. #2, your line sometimes gets wrapped around the release clip. By using this clip, but by using this little ring, your line never even comes in contact with the release clip. It's dangling from the release clip. So the ceramic ring, really important. Below that is our float. Now understand that kite floats come in a wide variety of sizes, shapes, and colors. This is your standard kite float right here. It is not weighted. Okay, it's small and streamlined, it's brightly colored so I can see it way out in the distance there. Okay, it's just your standard float. It's not a bobber, this doesn't go in the water, it's not a strike indicator, it just helps me keep track of exactly where my baits are. So when I'm looking off the side, I can go, there's my short, there's my medium, there's my long. Understand that you can purchase packs in different colors. Okay, why? Because I know that my green is my short, my chartreuse is my long, and my pink is my mid bait. So when I look out there, I could see the different colors and know which bait that is when I'm fishing 3 baits off of each kite. Do you have to use the different colors? No. I like to, and I'll tell you why, because when we're filming our show, it's easy for me to tell my camera guy, if I sat there and said, the mid bait, the mid bait, the mid bait, he doesn't know which bait I'm talking about to focus on that bait because it's about to get crushed by a sailfish or whatever it is. So I can say the pink float, the green float, the yellow float, and immediately he can key in on that color. So it's just easier when we're filming to use different colors, but absolutely not necessary. You can go with a single color. Understand that you do not need to have a float on your line. And on days when there is no wind whatsoever and we're struggling to get the kite up in the air, there are days we may eliminate all of this hardware and take the floats off altogether. Okay, this does nothing for you other than tell you where your line is and where the bait is. So you can, because believe it or not, even though it's so small, this catches wind. This catches wind and it weighs something, even if it's a gram. Sometimes having 3 of these on the 3 rods will make a difference on the elevation of that kite. So there are days we'll eliminate that altogether. But in most scenarios, you'll have your float. That's what goes on next after the ceramic ring. Below that is a very small egg sinker. And again, I'll try and show this there. Just a small little egg sinker. It could be anywhere from 1/8 of an ounce on up to 1 ounce. This helps keep your line vertical, straight up and down. However, if there's no wind, am I going to have this added lead? No. If there's a lot of wind, then the size of this lead is going to increase, because what happens is, as that kite is way out there in the air, the kite is moving up and down. And keep in mind, my line is going all the way up to the kite, to the release clips, and then straight down into the water where that bait is. As that kite climbs 10 feet in the air, what's going to happen to the bait? It's going to fly up in the air. And trust me, this is going to happen to you too. Okay, you're going to be on your boat. You're going to be like, what is that? What? Is that my goggle eye? What is that? That's my gog. That's all 3 of my gogs. They're 20 feet above the water. I can't catch anything like that. Okay, it's going to happen to you. So the weight, like I said, will help stabilize everything, and it'll keep your line more vertical. The size of that lead will be adjusted depending on the day. Sometimes you don't need any lead whatsoever. Other days you need, like I said, upwards of 1 ounce of lead on the real windy days. Below that little egg sinker is a small little plastic bead. Okay, just a very small plastic bead. And all that does is it just protects the knot on the swivel. There's a little snap swivel right there. Okay, and it just protects the knot as this sinker is going up and down all day long. It's going to chafe that knot. So we put a little plastic bead there to just protect the knot. Underneath that is a snap. Right there, like I said, that snap swivel, and that is where your leader is connected. We fish 12 to 15 feet of 50-pound diamond presentation fluorocarbon. Sometimes we'll go as light as 30-pound if we're looking for the big blackfin tunas. Sometimes, I don't want to say we'll ever go heavier, we won't. So it's either 30 or 50, okay? And certainly you don't need to go heavier. You know, back in the day, 15 years ago, 18 years ago, guys were kite fishing for sailfish with 80 and 100-pound leader material. And now, literally, we're fishing with 30 and 40-pound, you know, really lighter stuff. You don't need anything heavier than that. 12 to 15 feet is important. Your leader can't be any shorter than that. Why? Because as you're looking way out there, you know, toward the horizon, and you're looking at your balloons, if it's a little rough and the boat's going up and down or a little swelly, you don't want that float to be 2 feet off the water. You want the float to be above the horizon. Okay, it's kind of hard to explain until you get out there and do it, but you want it to be high enough to where you can see that float. So it's real important that that leader be 12 to 15 feet long. Also understand, in order to be effective when you're kite fishing, your live bait does not need to be directly on the surface. okay, it's perfectly fine if that live bait is 10 feet below the surface. So as you're drifting, the kite's going up and down, you're looking out there at your floats, because that's the only indication that you see, that you have of what's happening. And your floats are 4 feet off the water, and then they're 10 feet off the water, and then they're 2 feet off the water, and then they're 8 feet off the water. That's perfectly fine. That's all good. Your bait's just down there swimming. He's up on top. He doesn't need to be flickering right up on the surface. Oftentimes that hurts the bait and kills it more than anything else. So it's okay for that bait to be a few feet below. The hook itself, as I mentioned, most of the time, unless we are specifically targeting king mackerel, like in the springtime, okay, big kings will fish a short trace of wire, maybe 6 to 8 inches of wire. I don't like to add a lot of wire. You know, some guys will fish 24 inches of wire. I don't like to do that. 6 to 8 inches, 10 at the very, very most, just a short trace of wire. Otherwise, if you're targeting the tuna fish, cobia, dolphin, we skip wire altogether and we'll just tie on, like I said, either a 5.0 or a 7.0 VMC J hook, a live bait hook. That's all that you need, okay? Simple loop knot or a fisherman's knot, whatever you're more comfortable tying. That's your typical kite fishing outfit. However, understand something. When I'm reeling in a fish, when I reach that point right there, what happens? Look where the fish is, okay? The fish is at my left hand. This isn't even stretched all the way out, and the rod tip is right there. So now you have to understand that you're 12 feet away from your fish at this point. So obviously you've got to either step back on the boat for someone to gaff the fish, or put the rod in a rod holder and grab the leader. Point I'm making is you have to do something to close that gap and bring that fish closer to the boat, because this, you're not getting it any closer than this right here. Don't be the guy who goes, I got it, I got it, you know what I'm saying, and do any kind of crazy move like that and end up potentially breaking a rod or losing a fish or busting a leader or something. Just take your time. You've got the fish. He's only 12 feet away from you at this point. You know, work together with who's ever on the boat to get that fish boated, or a clean release on a sailfish, whatever it is that you're doing. That is the one advantage. Understand, remember what I said earlier about there are days when there's no wind whatsoever, okay, none whatsoever, where you can eliminate this float, okay? And when you eliminate the float and all of this hardware, you can shorten this leader to 6 feet, to 4 feet, to whatever you would like. And now you can fight that fish right to the boat, because this isn't stopping you if you remove that float. But you need to be a little bit more experienced and a little bit more on the advanced side to kite fish with no floats whatsoever. So getting back to this, I've let my kite out. It's 40 feet away from the boat. At this stage, I am going to take my long bait. If you're going to fish 3 baits, okay, I'm going to take my long bait, which is the rod that is furthest away from the kite rod, meaning this kite rod is in a rod holder right here in the back of my boat. I'm fishing just like this, okay? This is the back corner of my boat. That's where my kite rod is. The one that is holding the kite is back here. I now have 1, 2, 3 rods that I'm going to fish off this kite. This rod furthest away from the kite rod is my long bait. The middle one is obviously the middle bait, and then the rod that is as close to the kite rod is my close bait. It is not the opposite. Everybody follow me there? Okay, again, very important detail, okay, because your life will be miserable if you try and do it the other way. So the furthest away from the kite bait is the long bait. At this stage, this rod is in a rod holder. I'm going to put the rod in free spool with the clicker on. Okay, I'm going to take the hook and put the hook right on the reel seat, just like that, right on the reel seat. Everybody see that there? It's just, the hook is just fastened to the reel seat. The clicker is on, the rod is in the rod holder. You know, Marshall, we really need to set up a boat in here. That's what we need to do. So at this stage, I'm going to take my clip, my little black ceramic clip, my ring that's on the line, and I'm going to put it right in that release clip. And you know what I'm going to do at this stage too? I'm going to check the tension on that release clip. Remember we talked about that? I'm going to double check it. I'm going to put this on there and I'm going to pull it open and snap it open just to make sure that it's not too tight or too light. I'm then going to let this go. And I'm going to go back to my kite rod and I'm going to let the kite fly. And it's going to fly out another 50 feet. And line off of this reel is going to be going directly up to the release clip and back down to the reel. Everybody follow me there? This is the quickest and easiest way to deploy multiple baits off of a kite. When you get good at it, you can deploy 3 goggle eyes and the kite rod by yourself in 3 minutes, okay, flat. So the kite now goes up another 50 feet, and when do I stop it? I stop it when my next release clip comes off the kite reel, because the next swivel is gonna come up, it's gonna catch that mid release clip, and now the exact same thing is going to happen. I'm then going to take my middle rod and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And then I'm going to release it another 50 feet until the final clip comes out, my short clip, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with a third rod. And at this stage, I'm going to let the kite fly another 100 feet, approximately. So once the kite is way up there, what's happening at this stage is I'm looking up, and there are 3 lines that are going all the way up to the kite. Each one is in a release clip, and they're coming all the way back down to the rod. Everybody with me? Okay. Now, it's time to set my baits, because my kite is flying, it's up there, all 3 lines are going up to the release clips, they're all coming back down to the rod, everything is perfect. Okay, the kite's flying wonderfully. The sun, the moon, and the stars have aligned, and it's just a great day on the water. Everything is just happening perfectly. At this stage, I'm going to grab a goggle eye from the bait well. I'm going to walk over not to my short, not to my mid, but to the long kite bait. I'm going to take that hook off the reel. I'm going to embed it in the back of the bait, and I'm going to chuck the bait in the water. I'm going to grab the rod, and I'm going to start slowly reeling up the slack. And what's happening now, picture this, work with me here, okay, visualize this. My line is going all the way up to that release clip, came all the way back to the boat. I put a bait on it, I throw the bait in the water. The line is now still up at going to the release clip and coming back down to the bait, right? And the bait's in the water. By reeling up the slack, I'm taking that bait out to that release clip. Very slowly, I'm just walking it. I call it walking it. I'm walking that bait out to the release clip to where it's flying now vertically, straight up and down from that release clip. Once it is straight up and down from that release clip, the rod is in a rod holder. Obviously, it's not in free spool anymore. I now do the exact same thing with the mid bait and then with the short bait. Sounds a little bit confusing, but it's very easy once you get the hang of it, okay? If you're just starting out, you don't have to do it that way. You can feed the kite out and try it any other way you want, but I'm telling you, do it my way. You'll save time, effort, you'll be a much better kite fisherman. Once I walk that out, I've got one line that's coming straight down off the long clip. Like I said, I do the same thing with the middle one. Now I've got another bait that's coming down. I do the same thing with the short. That's what we call it, long, mid, short. That one is now straight up and down. All of the lines are going up. They're all coming in the water. The kite's flying perfectly off the kite reel. Now all I have to do is pretty much monitor what's happening. But understand, kite fishing is not a set it and forget it type of game. You are devoted to kite fishing. You are devoted to that kite rod. You're that guy. Your job on that day is to fish that rod, because understand, I'm now monitoring my kite rod and 3 baits. So I'm fishing essentially 4 rods that I'm responsible for myself. And then I'm going to take a spinner on this side of the boat and throw bait up on top. And then I'm going to take another rod with a 6-ounce lead and drop that down 50 feet. So now I've got these 3, a bait up on top, and a deep bait. Sounds like a lot for one person to handle, right? But you can. Okay, you can once you're really dialed in, and you're going to be really effective. Again, I'm looking at all of this and I'm watching what's happening. Understand that kite is fluctuating. The weather is fluctuating. The wind is not steady. Wind blows and you know, it gets stronger, it gets lighter, it's fluctuating. And as with every difference in the wind, the kite's either gonna go up or it's gonna come down. It's gonna move and you constantly have to adjust because I want my baits to be in the water. I don't want them to be in the air like we talked about before when you're looking out and you're like, hey, there's my goggle eye flying through the air. Okay, you obviously don't want that. And you don't want your float floating on the water. If your float is floating on the surface of the water, what does that indicate to you? Okay, it means that you have too much slack in your line. So you need to then slowly reel up in small increments, just slowly reel up until that float comes up out of the water. Or if the float is too high and your bait is flying in the air, obviously I'm going to put the reel in free spool and drop that bait back into the water. And you're doing that with 3 rods, okay? 3 rods. You're constantly monitoring it. You're making small adjustments the entire time in order to achieve that perfect presentation. Very rarely, I don't want to say never, but rarely do you fly a kite, you set your baits, and you can just sit there and go like this, okay? It does happen though, and when it does, it's magical. Okay, I remember one day in particular, I'll never forget this, by myself fishing an evening for blackfin tunas in the afternoon up off of Boca. I get a kite up, I get my 3 baits out, I'm fishing the 1 kite, 3 baits, nobody's on the boat other than me, and things are just perfect, just a perfect drift straight north in 150, the boat's not going in or off, it's just a straight line at a perfect speed. I mean, you couldn't have, it was just textbook, it was amazing. And I'm looking, I'm going, I wonder if I could fish 2 kites. So I decide to fly a 2nd kite with 3 more baits because I don't have to monitor it. Because once I'm setting it, literally, you don't have to do anything. It was just perfect. So I set a 2nd kite with 3 baits. Never caught a single fish that night. I didn't have a single bite. I didn't. But it was absolutely awesome sitting there by myself with 2 kites and 6 baits, and it was just a magical experience. I wish I would have caught something. But in hindsight, I look at it and go, can you imagine if you get blasted by 6 fish at one time, right? What a nightmare and mess that would have been. But you could get there, okay? You too can get there, I'm telling you. So anyhow, you're monitoring your kite baits, you're making slight adjustments. Suddenly, you know, the really cool thing about kite fishing too, like what I said earlier, it's visual. 9 times out of 10, you can tell you're gonna get a bite before you get a bite. Okay, you can tell something's happening, something's gonna happen. Suddenly you're looking out and all 3 lines are straight up and down, right? They're in a line. My kite's up there. I've got a short bait that's right there. I've got a mid bait that's right there. I've got a long bait that's right there. And they're just kind of meandering, you know, they're moving. And then suddenly the middle one goes whoop, way out there. You know why? You're about to get eaten. Okay, so you're like, oh, my mid bait, you know he's about to get eaten. So you get to see all of these different things and you learn how to read. You're reading the pattern. You're reading what the rod is telling you, what the lines are telling you. Other times, a bait will come right to the surface and just start flipping out right up on top, splashing, trying to escape because it sees something that you don't see. Okay, it sees something you don't see and it's about to get eaten. Other times, there's no indication whatsoever. You're just sitting there looking out and suddenly a 30-pound king mackerel just comes flying out of the water with your goggle eye in its mouth. You know, or half your gog goes that way, half goes that way, and you missed them. Okay, and that's going to happen too. Okay? So the whole visual aspect. However, you've got to stay on top of it. It's when, you know, it's those times when you turn your back that something happens. You know, so always if there's other people on the boat, if you have to do something else, say to them, hey, do me a favor, watch my kite baits real quick while I do whatever it is that you're going to do. Okay, make sure somebody's watching at all times. Now, if you get a bite, when you get a bite, not if, okay, let's say you get a bite on the mid bait, right? It pops out of the clip. Now remember, your line's going all the way up and straight down. A fish grabs the bait. Doesn't matter what kind of fish it is. It grabs the bait. It starts swimming away. This line becomes tight. And the tighter it gets, the more pressure that is being put on that little clip until it reaches the point where the clip goes pop and pops open. And now your line falls and you have this big belly of line, right? You have a lot of slack. So at this stage, you grab your rod and you start cranking like crazy. You're turning that handle as fast as you can because you want to get all of that slack up, which is why these Daiwa Saltiga reels are 6.4 to 1. It's a fast reel. That's why when you're kite fishing, you need a fast reel. Okay, if you have something that's 4 to 1, whew, okay, so you need a fast reel. You're cranking, cranking, cranking until that line comes tight. As soon as it comes tight, the hook hopefully finds a home and you're connected, line screaming off your reel, and you're super excited and you're screaming like a little girl. I do. I tell you that right now. You come kite fishing with me, you better prepare yourself. All right, there's some strange noises that come out of me when I'm kite fishing, okay? All kinds of crazy stuff because it's super exciting. It really, really is. So in turn, you're now fighting that fish, but you still have 2 other baits in the water. And guess what? When you hook one fish, guess what could happen? It's often very, very common that you'll double up, you know, sometimes even triple. So you've got to really make sure that someone else is still monitoring those other lines. Understand too that if that fish decides to go under a bait, you may have to reel up the short bait and get it out of the water in order for the other fish to go underneath it. You follow me? Okay, so you, or it could be on the long bait. On the long side, you may have to reel up that long bait and really quickly. And I mean, everybody's got to work together. There's so much that's happening at one time when you're fishing 2 kites with 3 baits off of each kite. You know, there's so much that's happening so fast, but it's super exciting and you can make it all work if everybody knows what to do. It's when you're all standing there going, what do I do? What do I do? You know, that's when you're in a lot of trouble. So make sure that when you do go out there kite fishing, that whoever's on the boat with you, that they understand. They understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do, and people are fascinated by it. I take people kite fishing and they're just like, a kite? Fishing? How? And why are lines way up there? You know, what's happening here? You know, they just have no idea. And then you explain it all and they're just fascinated by it. And they want to participate and they want to get involved because it is that exciting, you know, to see it all happen and to, you know, to me, catching fish is certainly exciting, right? That's the objective of all of this. But let me tell you something. Going out there, getting a kite to fly, setting 3 baits off of a kite, and getting this wonderful presentation, that in itself is rewarding enough. You know, that in itself is a huge accomplishment. Just doing that is a tremendous accomplishment. It really is. And then everything else will come. You know, once you perfect all of that, you'll get the bites, you'll catch the fish. So other things may happen too. You know, you're out there kite fishing and one of your baits, your mid bait that we just talked about, comes out of the clip. You know, maybe you got a bite, you either caught a fish, you missed a fish, or maybe the clip was set too loose and it opened up. Well, now I still have a short bait and I have a long bait, but I don't have a middle bait anymore. So what you can do is just simply let the kite fly further away from the boat to get your short bait a little bit further away from the boat and still fish with 2 baits. You don't always have to have 3 baits. Everybody follow me there? Okay, of course, ideally you want to, but you don't always have to have those 3 baits. Make small adjustments with everything that you do when you're out there. When you're letting the kite out, you know, don't just pop the reel into free spool and let it fly. You know, monitor everything that's happening and do everything in small increments and small adjustments, and you'll see how it affects everything. Understand too, the distance or the, you know, where that kite is away from the boat is going to vary tremendously. I'm going to talk about Carlos again, my co-host. He drives me crazy. This guy drives me crazy. He catches fish like crazy, but drives me crazy. He fishes his kite way too close to the boat. I like to fish my kite way out there. He likes to fish his close to the boat. I'm like, why are you fishing your kite so damn close to the boat? He's like, they're going to bite it right there. I'm like, they're not going to bite it. I'm like, get it out there, you know? So everybody has a different kind of like philosophy. You know, he likes to fish his closer. I like to fish mine a little bit further away. So there's no one perfect distance. But as a rule of thumb, the distance from the kite to the first swivel is about 40 feet. Okay? And then in between swivels is 50 feet. So you've got 40 feet, then you have from swivel 1 to swivel 2 is another 50, another 50, another 50. So that's 200 feet right there. And then obviously you've got to get the kite away from the boat a distance, you know, with him a little bit closer, with me a little bit further. And depending on the conditions, you know, depending on the wind, it's all about feel, you know, and it's all about what looks right and what's working right on that particular day, okay? Make sure that when you are letting that kite fly away from the boat, that your reels are in free spool with the clicker on. Free spool with the clicker on, okay? Because if your clicker is not on, your reel's gonna go whoop, and you're gonna have what we call a professional overrun, okay? Other people may call it a backlash. I call it a professional overrun, okay? And it's gonna be a nightmare because all 3 of your reels are gonna be backlashed. So make sure that the clicker is on. Also, if the clicker is not on, what's gonna happen with the clips? They're all gonna open. They're all gonna pop open and it's gonna release your lines from each of those clips because the tension is gonna build up. So whenever you're letting that kite out, make sure you're in free spool. Not when you're set. Once you are set and that kite is flying and you need to make slight adjustments, 90% of the time you're adjusting these baits. You're not adjusting the kite. Okay, the kite's up there, it's flying, it's stable, I'm not letting it further, I'm not bringing it back, I have it where I want it. Okay, now I'm just adjusting where the baits are with the rods. We go to move, now it's time to move. Okay, we're going up for another drift, we're going home, whatever it is, we're gonna move. Okay, now you've gotta bring everything back. Keep in mind, you've gotta work opposite now. Okay. And the opposite of how you deployed everything is how you have to retrieve everything. Excuse me. Fortunately, with the electric reel, it's like having another person on the boat. So the first thing I'm going to do is push that little lever forward, and I'm slowly going to start to retrieve the kite. You don't want to come in at full speed. You'll potentially break the spars on the kite. So just come in at a steady pace. Just push that little lever forward, start retrieving the kite. As you are retrieving that kite, remember, you've got 3 lines that are now coming toward the boat. So you have to walk over to your rods and slowly start to retrieve that slack, okay, on all 3 of those rods. Now, there's something called a trident, okay, which if you're not familiar with what this is, we all know what a rod holder is on a boat. You can put a rod in a rod holder. If you're kite fishing with 3 rods and your boat is 30 feet long, excuse me one second, and your boat is 30 feet long, thank you. This is a trident. I'm able to put this in a rod holder and I can stand right here and guess what's right here? 3 rods. I can manage all 3 rods from one position. If you didn't have this and you had 1 rod here, another rod here, another rod there lined up the side of the boat, it could be really challenging. You're going to be literally running from rod to reel up the line. By having them all right here, it makes your life much, much easier. So my kite rod, the one that is flying the kite, is over here. It's in a rod holder over here, and my 3 baits, the 3 rods that I'm fishing a bait from, are in this trident. That is one advantage of these high performance center consoles like our 39 CB. You know, you guys see these boats and you're like, oh my God, you have 88 rod holders. Look at all those rod holders. Damn right I do. Okay, you know why? Because I don't need this. Okay, and I can fish 3 kites with 3 rods or from each kite, and I don't need this. So that's the idea with the rod holders, is that you're able to position the rods exactly where you want them. We do have a lot of rod holders, but consider it different sets. There's sets of rod holders for trolling, there's sets of rod holders for kite fishing, and when you combine them, you have 88, okay, if not more. So I'm bringing everything in. I get to the first clip closest to me. Obviously, I pop it open. I bring up my bait. The other 2 are still fine. They're out there. You can stop the kite if you want it. You know, that's like I said, the real nice thing about those electric reels is like having another person on the boat. You can stop that kite, you can keep the kite coming in. I'm retrieving those baits, I take them off, I throw them in the live well. And keep in mind too, you know, talking about live bait, these guys that are tournament sail fishing or any kind of tournaments, they never use a goggle eye twice. So if it has a hole in it from kite fishing, or if it was bridled, they'll throw it away and they'll put a fresh bait on the next drift. Now you may or may not have $3,000 worth of bait on your boat that day, okay? And you certainly can use baits more than once as long as they're, of course, lively and frisky. But obviously fresh baits is gonna make a big difference. So you bring in your rods, the kite stops because it has an auto stop feature where it'll stop the kite 40 feet away from the boat, okay, which is important because if it continues to retrieve the kite all the way into the rod tip, guess what's gonna happen? Pop, it's gonna break and your kite's gonna fly away, okay, and we don't want that to happen. So make sure that you set your auto retrieve or your auto stop feature, which is very easy to do on those reels. I now put those rods away. We bring the kite in. It's now time to move. We unsnap the kite from the swivel and we take a designated kite holder or two designated kite holders and they literally cradle the kite if it has a balloon on it because I don't want to reset all of that. I don't want to go through all of that again. Once you get this fixed into position, it's fixed. And the only time I want to re-rig this is if or when my balloon pops, which is going to happen. Okay, or at the end of the day, I pop the balloon because the day is over. But if I can keep this one setup throughout the day without having to do this over, I'm a happy camper. Rarely does that happen, but it will. So they cradle this very carefully. Obviously, if you don't have a balloon on there, then you can just put this in, you know, in a cabin or wherever it is. Be careful not to step on these kites. They're super strong, but they're also fragile. If the kite tears, it's not going to fly as effectively. Remember, or it won't fly at all, depending on how large that tear is. Remember what I said about the kites getting wet? If they get wet, they won't fly. So that, in a nutshell, is pretty much a summary of getting these kites to fly, the advantages of kite fishing, how to rig them. I mean, there's obviously so much more to it. There really is, especially at more of an advanced level. You know, there's a lot more to it. But even at the basic level, it's a science. It's very detail-oriented, as you can already see. Make sure, like I said, I can't stress this enough, we carry spares of everything in one case. This is our kite case. There's extra floats, there's extra snaps, there's all sorts of different egg sinkers, hooks, everything, you know, that we could possibly need. Some short wire trace in there in case we want to add wire because we're getting bit off all day long. Little rubber bands, swivels. This is all you need, one little kite case. And I think they even sell these here fully outfitted with everything that you need in them. Make sure you have extra balloons, extra helium, extra everything, and be prepared to fail. Be prepared to get frustrated. Be prepared to be humbled, because that's what kite fishing is. However, make no mistake that once you get dialed in and once everything is perfect and you really build that level of confidence, you're going to catch more fish than you've ever caught before. It's incredibly effective. You ever go out here in June or July on a nice Saturday morning during a tournament and there's 125 boats up and down the edge fishing for blackfin tuna, cobia, dolphin, wahoo, and kingfish. And of the 125 boats, you know how many of them are kite fishing? 125. Okay, do you know why? Because it works. Okay, it's that incredibly effective. If it wasn't, everybody wouldn't do it. That's the bottom line. You know, it works. Does it work great every day? No. I'm going to tell you there have been days where we've had 2 kites with 3 baits off of each kite, and all day long, every single bite came on the flatline side. Came on that side of the boat, not one single bite on a kite bait. That's happened. Okay? Did the kite bait somehow influence all of the bites on this side? They certainly didn't hurt, right? I had 6 baits. I'm mimicking a school of bait fish. You know, I've got 6 struggling baits, so it certainly didn't hurt. Why they didn't get bit, I don't know. I can't explain that. On other days, the only bites that you'll get will be on the kite baits. So it's not a, guaranteed system. It's something that certainly if you incorporate kite fishing into your overall arsenal, you're absolutely going to be more of a more effective fisherman. There's no question. But don't think that it's easy, because it isn't, okay? But it's certainly worth all of the effort and all of the tackle, and it is incredibly rewarding. Not only the fish that you're going to catch, but just doing it. When I first started fishing down here in Florida, I used to look at all of these guys kite fishing. I used to be like, no way. No, who needs a kite to catch a fish? That's ridiculous. You don't need a kite. I'm not doing that ever. It looks too complicated. It's not that effective. It just doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. Nowadays, I'm not going to go out there and not kite fish. You know what I mean? It's a whole different world. So certainly I'm a believer. Anybody that's ever kite fished is, a believer. And I'm telling you, if you do it enough, you too will be believers.